Welcome back to House Judiciary. We are looking at H 578, an act relating to penalties and procedures for animal cruelty offenses. And we're going to start with our first witness, Heather Bent from the Vermonters Against Cruelty and Abandonment. Heather, you could identify yourself for the record?
Thank you. My name is Heather Bent, and I am speaking on behalf of VACA, Vermonters Against Animal Cruelty and Abandonment, in support of House Bill 578. I'm also the founder of Potter's Angels Rescue, which was established in 2010, and have assisted with animal cruelty cases for over 10 years. Since 2021, I've served as animal control for Marshfield, and I currently operate a dog boarding and daycare facility in Barre, Vermont. Throughout my work in animal welfare, I've focused on implementing solutions rather than becoming overwhelmed by systemic failures. That approach led to the creation of VACA, which I co-founded with Renee Falconer, who's here today, and obtained nonprofit status in 2025. VACA operates as a collaborative statewide initiative working alongside animal control officers, law enforcement, veterinarians, animal behavior experts, rescues, and shelters. It's our mission to advocate for and support animals in Vermont that have been victims of abuse, abandonment, and neglect. We provide guidance, connect resources, and offer support to facilitate a coordinated effort and effective response to emerging needs within the state. In collaboration with animal control officers and law enforcement, we strive to enhance the enforcement of our current animal protection laws and endorse improvements to better protect animals in Vermont, which is why I'm here today. As you may know, Vermont faces many challenges in animal welfare, but today I'm going to focus on the solutions offered in House Bill 578 and why this legislation is urgently needed. Under current law, animals seized for cruelty or neglect can remain in custody for months or even years while cases move through the court system. Animal cruelty cases typically take 6 to 18 months to resolve. That's a long time when you're caring for an animal during that time frame. Behavioral decline in a shelter setting often begins within a few weeks. So 6 to 18 months, it can do a lot of damage to the animal during that time. Animals deteriorate behaviorally due to the stress of isolation. Adoptability declines, shelters and rescues have to absorb the costs of care. Courts lack consistent cost recovery methods. And in some cases, animals get returned to their abusers, forcing animal advocates to violate their moral and ethical obligations to protect those animals. These outcomes, unfortunately, are not rare or isolated, but commonplace in Vermont. Care costs on average $20 to $40 per day per animal, which covers food, staffing, and basic care. Due to the length of time in limbo, costs frequently reach $5,000 to $15,000 per animal and far more in multi-animal cases. Currently, those costs are being absorbed by rescues, municipalities, and volunteers, not by those responsible for the abuse. And this is something that I think we need to change. For these reasons, there has been a systemic breakdown in enforcement as well. After repeatedly being burned by this current system, rescue shelters are increasingly unable or unwilling to accept seized animals. And as a result, law enforcement's ability to enforce cruelty laws has been severely compromised. I have personally been told by law enforcement officers as well as game wardens that they were instructed by their superiors not to seize animals due to the lack of placement options and funding. State attorneys have also declined to pursue search warrants for the same reason, leaving animals in environments where they continue to suffer. Until Vermont provides the tools and support necessary to enforce and prosecute its animal protection laws, those laws will remain largely inconsequential. Civil forfeiture was introduced into the statute in, I think, 2014-ish. Yet animals are still being trapped in legal limbo, treated as property that can be stashed somewhere indefinitely. And the fact is, animals are sentient beings. They require daily care, socialization, exercise, medical attention, food, and shelter. And that all doesn't come at no cost. They cannot simply be stuffed in a corner and forgotten about, as seems to be the current thinking of what we should do with them, because shelters and volunteer organizations have been taken for granted and expected to shoulder unreasonable financial and moral burdens for extended periods of time. Many are drained of resources while being told in some cases to return the animals to their abusers, violating every ethical principle they stand for. This system is neither reasonable nor sustainable. Vermont has burned critical bridges by failing to address these enforcement failures. Assigning financial responsibility for seized animals to their owners is the most reasonable and just solution. The care of these animals, ongoing costs, and requiring owners to either bear those costs or relinquish ownership is consistent with established principles of responsible ownership. Based on documented experience, animals subject to seizure have exhibited clear indicators of neglect as verified by licensed veterinarians. Animal ownership carries enforceable duties, including providing adequate food, shelter, veterinary care, and protection from suffering. When an animal is seized, those ethical obligations have already been breached. If an owner is unable or unwilling to assume the financial and practical responsibilities necessary for their proper care, termination of ownership rights is an appropriate and proportionate remedy. Ownership should be treated as a responsibility and not as an entitlement. House Bill 578 also recognizes that accountability includes rehabilitation. It gives courts the authority to require education, treatment, and counseling for offenders, addressing the underlying behaviors that lead to cruelty, which is an essential component of prevention. Animal cruelty is strongly linked to broader patterns of violence. Individuals who abuse animals are 3 to 5 times more likely to commit violent crimes against people. Up to 71% of domestic violence victims report pets being threatened or harmed, and 88% of households under Child Protective Services investigation also report animal abuse. Because of these correlations, the FBI classifies animal cruelty as a Group A violent offense. This is a public safety issue and should not be treated as a minor crime. Approximately 70% of individuals charged with animal cruelty have committed at least one other crime, and 40% have prior violent crime convictions. When cruelty is minimized early, opportunities for intervention and prevention are lost. These reforms are being presented clarify cruelty definitions, establish consistent cost of care recovery, require meaningful animal possession bans, and create clearer forfeiture and custody pathways. Most importantly, they move Vermont from a reactive system to a preventative one, reducing repeat offenses, prolonged suffering, and the misuse of public and nonprofit resources. As Vermont improves coordination and data collection, these reforms ensure that the future data reflects effective intervention, not preventable harm. VACA strongly urges the committee to advance House Bill 578. Animals cannot testify for themselves. These reforms ensure Vermont's laws speak clearly and firmly on their behalf while also protecting public safety and public resources. Thank you for your time and commitment to protecting Vermont's most vulnerable. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any questions? I'm wondering if you submitted your testimony to Nate Biscotti?
No, I haven't, but I can do that.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That way we'll put it on our committee page and it'll be available to us to reread and others who might want to see it. Oh, we do have a question, Representative Arsenault.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for your testimony, Heather. I was wondering if I had the same question that Representative Rachelson raised earlier about the available animal cruelty prevention programs or educational programs. Are you aware of any such programs and how available they are?
Yeah, no, I'm not.
Okay. Looks like maybe I'll ask Renee the same question when she's up.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Great, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next up, we'll have Renee Falconer, also from Vermont, Vermonters Against Cruelty and Abandonment.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Yes, my name is Renee Falconer. I live in Brownington. I'm a longtime animal control officer for much of Orleans County, also co-founder of VACA, along with Heather, and also another nonprofit of my own, Pets of the Kingdom. I have been investigating animal cruelty and working as an animal control officer for over 20 years. In those 20 years, I've witnessed firsthand where our strengths and weaknesses are. Animal cruelty is a crime that should be taken seriously. It often leads to or is on the coattails of many other serious and domestic crimes. Requiring education, treatment, and counseling for offenders should be mandatory. As with most other crimes, we see repeat offenders. We also know that around 70% of people who abuse or neglect animals are also inflicting the same abuse or neglect on family members, spouses, or children. On the flip side of this, around 80% of domestic violence also involves harm to the family pet. Treatment and counseling would be addressing so much more than just animal abuse. Our civil forfeiture process does need some work. The Civil Forfeiture Bill S-237 was passed in June of 2014. I actually helped to create this bill after a seizure case in 2012 in Jeffersonville nearly bankrupt our nonprofit organization. 6 draft horses were seized by law enforcement, and in our care for 15 months, the expenses exceeded $35,000. In the past 11 years, I've worked on many other seizure cases with multiple other organizations and agencies, and I've seen the current civil forfeiture bill work in a few cases, but I've seen it fail in many more. Civil forfeiture needs to be utilized and understood by law enforcement, states' attorneys, and judges. Adding owner accountability for costs of care to the forfeiture bill will also be super helpful. It will force owners to either pay for the care that they should have legally been providing for those animals in the first place, or they will opt to surrender the animals, which may in turn keep many of these cases out of the court system altogether. We need to repair the system so that our unfunded, volunteer-based rescues and shelters don't have to struggle with care and expenses while waiting months or longer for their day in court. Oversight of offenders who are charged with animal cruelty is a must. Offenders often repeat their crimes or go against court orders and acquire more animals. I'm currently aware of 2 separate cases in Orleans County where the court prohibited an offender to own more animals, and yet they have more animals because there's no clear plan to prevent or prosecute this behavior. In 2025, the collaborative efforts through VACA and all partnering shelters and rescues have saved, rehabilitated, provided care for, and rehomed a total of 2,359 abandoned, surrendered, and seized animals. Since we have no funding in Vermont for animal welfare, we need to at the very least, protect our rescues, animal control officers, and shelters who do this work day in and day out with nothing more than volunteers and donations. I ask that you please consider supporting this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Can I ask the same?
Absolutely.
I'll ask you the same question, Renee, since you seem to react to it. Do you know of any
I actually have a great, very recent experience with this because I was actually reached out to by the Orleans County Probation and Parole Program because recently one of our very own Vermont animal control officers was charged with animal cruelty. And part of her criminal charges were that she had to go to some type of educational animal cruelty prevention program. The probation and parole office actually reached out to me asking if I had anything up my sleeve. And I don't. So I actually reached out to Joanne Barbeau through Humane World and Vermont Humane Federation to see if there was anything. I didn't hear back. I'm assuming they're still researching that.
Okay, that seems important. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Renee, you may have said the 6 draft horses for, I think you said 5 years that were boarded. I'm just wondering who.
15 months.
15 months. Okay, it's $35,000.
Yes.
Okay, I got a little bit of it right. I'm just wondering who paid that.
We fundraised.
You may have said.
We fundraised and got grant money to pay for all that.
Okay.
And in the end, yes, the restitution, Mr. Fletcher was ordered to pay restitution. Out of the $35,000, he pushed back and they whittled it down to $6,000 out of $35,000. That's all he had to pay. Even though we had receipts and we had everything all on paper of that $35,000, the court system whittled it down to $6,000. And it took 7 years for him to pay back the $6,000.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you. Oh, one more from Representative
Sir,
Arsenault.
I'm just processing something else you said related to this, and I want to make sure I heard you correctly. I heard you say that there is no funding from the state for the care of animals that are seized. Is that correct?
That is correct. I think I've had one cruelty case where law enforcement seized the animals and I was just asked to house them and I did get reimbursed for some of that. I don't know where that money came from, but as far as the everyday, day in and day out work that we do there, we don't have any funding for animal welfare. We don't have any pot of money that we can access in cases like these.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Off the top of your head, I know you can't come up with an accurate figure, but what would a budget like that look like? I mean, there's one case, $35,000.
It would have to be unlimited because you just don't know. I mean,
right. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, next up, we have Trevor Whipple, former police chief, Barry and South Burlington. And if I'm not mistaken, Trevor, you've been in here before.
I don't know some of your committee members. It's been a few years, but you're absolutely right, Mr. Acting Chair. I've been there a time or 2 or 20.
Yeah.
So I thank you for the opportunity to reappear. I'm sorry I'm not in person. For those that have not met me on the record, my name is Trevor Whipple. I was invited to testify today as a former law enforcement officer, and that's how I'm testifying is from my knowledge as a public servant, my experience as a police chief. In full transparency, I do work part-time on contract with the Humane World for Animals and draw some of my knowledge from that experience as well. So I served as a police officer in Barrie for 23 years, the chief there for 7.5. Then I went up to South Burlington. I was the chief there for 12 years. This bill is near and dear to my heart. I'm also an animal advocate, rescue dogs and cats who share my house with me, and appreciate the committee taking up this bill. First, I'll speak to the part that Eric did a very good job navigating, and that is the enhancements to the sex with animals laws, the bestiality laws. I was a sex crimes investigator for about 15 years of my time in Barrie, and had more experience than I wished with those cases. I do appreciate some of the enhancements being made in the law, particularly around video, the creation, possession, the showing of video to children. witnesses before me have done a really good job articulating what we know about the link between those that perpetrate crimes against animals and the deviant behavior. Many of them go on to perpetrate against humans in domestic situations or with children. So I would certainly speak in support of all those enhancements that are being added to the animal sex crimes law. I think that although they're not used that frequently in Vermont, what we are finding is attributed somewhat to my early years, the mid-'80s, of investigating child sex crimes. We didn't hear much about it. The community didn't realize it was that pervasive. But once folks became educated, really started to pull the veil back and say, these things do happen in our communities. If I see something, I'm going to come forward. I'm not going to be uncomfortable about it. And I think we're starting to see that with sex crimes involving animals. It happens. It happens way too often. And should it come forward here in Vermont, I appreciate that this committee is considering adding some additional elements to that statute. Moving on to the civil forfeiture cost of care sections that you folks are considering. First, I'll speak to civil forfeiture. It does exist. We used it when I was the chief in the city of South Burlington. We had a case involving just 2 dogs where children came forward, reported their father for pretty significantly abusing the 2 dogs in the household. One had received a broken leg, allegedly from an assault with a lacrosse stick. There'd been some chemicals sprayed in the faces of the dogs. That case went forward. We immediately applied for the civil forfeiture, working with our prosecutor. What we found is, as is no surprise to you folks, that our prosecutors' offices are busy. They don't necessarily have somebody who can suddenly carve out time to file a motion of civil forfeiture and pay attention to that with the amount of time necessary. We did have a prosecutor that brought that forward. It went through the court system. It was not expeditious. Although those animals only remained in custody for 40 days. During that time, there was a negotiation. The gentleman that was accused did plead guilty, and part of that was that he agreed to forfeit the animals. But during that 40-day period, those animals were kept in confinement with limited contact. They didn't have the care that one might expect of a family pet because they were in a kennel environment. One of them was a Rottweiler, developed kennel rage. It ended up violently attacking the caretaker, actually bit his thumb off. And so at the end of 40 days, it was a pretty reasonable bill. The bill was just over $1,900. And the court ordered that the accused pay restitution to the city of South Burlington. When I retired in 2019, this case happened in 2011. I retired 8 years later in 2019. I had not seen a penny. I, this morning, contacted the Victim Restitution Unit at the state, and to date, the city of South Burlington has received no reimbursement for that case. So for civil forfeiture, it is a vehicle. I think it takes too long. There is some time shortening that you folks are considering. I think that that is valuable. One of the challenges is with restitution, when it's not an individual, it's not a person that was harmed, it does not pay from the restitution fund. The restitution unit has to wait for that money to come in before they can send it out. So as of this morning, that gentleman still owes everything to the city of South Burlington, and there is no, other than attaching, they're waiting for him to get a tax return. And they told me this morning that if he does get a tax return, that money then will be encumbered by the state and given to South Burlington. Also, an example, communication with the gentleman that took over for me in South Burlington, Chief Burke, who's now moved back to Burlington. But when Chief Burke was in South Burlington, he shared that in September of 23, they had 6 dogs that were seized from a pretty egregious environment. They had been living in a camper, very poorly cared for. Those animals were seized. During that court process, it took 5 months to finally come to conclusion there. And during that 5-month period, the city of South Burlington was charged $11,000 for the care, veterinary care and kennel care of those dogs. Again, a very limited mechanism to recoup those funds. So when this committee is considering the additions to our animal cruelty statutes, the additions of a cost of care, that's pretty intriguing to me as a former police chief, someone that was entrusted with managing a budget, managing taxpayer dollars. This transfers that burden of expense back to the person responsible. If someone is abusing, neglecting their animals, they have taken those animals in. They have made a commitment to those animals. And if they fail at that commitment, then they still should be expected to pay for their care or relinquishment. The cost of care that is being proposed here does allow someone, if they realize that they've made a mistake, they're over their head, they do have the opportunity to forfeit those animals. But should they wish to exert their due process rights, and they should wish to challenge that, and the proposal here does speak to reasonable costs. So there is some mechanism there to, I think, assess. The court can assess, is this reasonable? Somebody's not going to be charged an exorbitant rate for their dog to go to doggy daycare. It's going to meet the basic needs of the animal. So I think that provides us some real common sense mechanisms here in Vermont. I do know that it exists in many other states. I think it's been very productive and very helpful. And I believe it was Representative Rachelson, and I had the opportunity to jog my memory a little bit. I believe you asked the question of, do we ask citizens to pay for anything else when it's removed from their custody? As a child abuse investigator, I would love that people who lose their children have to pay for their care, but we know we don't do that. But we do have a too robust, probably, state budget at the Agency of Human Services that is entrusted with the care and housing of children who have been taken in. I did find, and only from memory, but I did find one instance where we do require people to pay when law enforcement seizes their property. And that's it's not so new anymore, but in our firearm seizure law. When we order that firearms are seized from folks through court order, they have to pay to store those firearms. So there is some precedent here to have citizens pay for the storage of their property, the care for their property, while a process plays out. And with that, I will be unexpectedly brief, I think. I'm not known for brevity, other than to, again, certainly thank the committee for an invitation. I'm available, obviously, today or at any time if something comes up. And this is a bit of a passion of mine, and I do really appreciate and support your consideration of the changes in law.
Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Whipple. I'm wondering if you would say that the new provision, the adding of, sub whatever G, possesses, films, or distributes visual images of sexual conduct with an animal, that addition, that it wasn't carried over into, the aggravated cruelty section. Would you recommend that be carried over and, with the addition of the language in the presence of a minor or in which the minor participates?
Yeah, I think when we look at what I'm assuming the intent here was that we wanted to send a message here in Vermont that if you're perpetrating these crimes, either having children perpetrate them or having children watch them take place, that we want to hold people accountable to a much higher level. And here's where I'm not known for brevity. The short answer is yes. I certainly would support taking letter G from page 5 in the misdemeanor section for general recording of or distributing visual images. I would support if that involves children or they're distributed or shown to children. I certainly would support moving that down to the aggravated section or adding this clause to the aggravated section when it involves children, making it a felony.
Thank you. That's helpful. I just wanted to get get a witness on the record saying that, so thank you. I think, oh, one more question about, and this is sort of for any witness, really, but the question that was raised on page 8, do you think it reasonable to line 13 to maintain this exception for livestock or poultry, not being subject to forfeiture?
I think that for me, I would have to assess the circumstances. I can't speak for what has happened before. I'm guessing that there was maybe concerns here for people where this is their livelihood, this is their business, and that they didn't want to completely remove all means of them providing for themselves and their family. I do think that maybe there's an option there for the court to consider it. I don't know that it should be a mandatory situation. Someone may treat their dog or their cat very differently than they do their dairy herd.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief, and it's great to see you again. And if you haven't already, if you could send your written testimony to Nate Biscotti, that would be great.
Will do. Yes. Thank you, sir.
And also, Renee, if you're still, I think you're still there. I don't think I asked you to, if you haven't already, to send your testimony to Nate Biscotti also. Thank you. Okay, next up we have Joanne Bourbeau, Northeastern Regional Director, Humane World for Animals.
Do I give these to Nate or just I pass them around?
We'll get him a copy.
Copies? Okay. He's got the electronic copies as well.
Oh, okay, then that's perfect.
And Chairman, if I might, I have my cohort, Ann Chinowith on Zoom, so I thought it would be more efficient if we testified together.
Absolutely.
I'm going to give the Vermont perspective, and Ann comes from the national perspective. She's direct. I'll let her introduce herself as well. But my name is Joanne Bourbeau. I'm the Northeastern Regional Director for Humane World for Animals. You may remember formerly the Humane Society of the United States. I was a lobbyist in this building for many, many years and was involved in the drafting of a lot of the laws that we're talking about today. I live in Whitingham, Vermont, and have lived and worked in this capacity for a little over 30 years. And I'll let Ann introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ann Chinowith. Of course, I'm a colleague of Joanne's, and I've worked for Humane World for Animals for over 25 years. I'm glad to be here today. I think what I can add, hopefully, to what Joanne will be saying in support of this animal welfare law is my national perspective on specifically, somewhat on all the issues in the bill, but specifically on costs of animal care. So I think it was asked earlier if that's bond and forfeiture. The model that we have for cost of animal care is bond and forfeiture. So hopefully I can answer any questions you have from a national perspective on that part of the legislation.
Great, thank you.
So as part of my position with Humane World, I'm also a regular instructor of animal cruelty investigations at the Vermont Police Academy. Last fall, we were glad to host a training requested by VACA on animal cruelty investigations for animal control officers. You may recall the law that the legislature passed last year removed shelters and animal control officers as having enforcement authority under the statute. So the training was really focused on how animal control officers can work in partnership with law enforcement and provide the resources needed to conduct these cases. We strongly support this bill. It fills a very critical gap in our system right now. You've heard testimony about the fact that there is simply nowhere for animals to go. I have worked with law enforcement, local law enforcement. I've worked with sheriff's offices, state police, game wardens on a multitude of cases here in Vermont over the years. And I have never seen it to this point where we literally have no place for animals to go. law enforcement officers will often call me and say, yeah, where am I going to bring these 6 dogs? And I have no solutions for them. So very happy to see and thank Representative Krasnow for introducing this bill. Even though we don't have investigatory powers here in Vermont too. I want to make that clear that I'm not a humane officer. We work in concert with law enforcement and provide resources. We've been on the ground. I don't know if anybody remembers the 2011 Bakersfield case, in which we seized over 60 Labradors from a puppy mill up in Bakersfield and had to house them for 6 weeks. We've worked on several other cases, where the Eden case, where 90 dogs were taken out of a home. And these cases put a huge financial strain on law enforcement, on the municipality, on the animal caregivers who are tasked with taking care of them for an indefinite period of time with no promise of financial reimbursement. And of course, that's not why the animal care community does this. It's not a making money kind of game. But to be able to recoup their costs is very essential, to be able to have them as a partner in these cases. This bill specifically, there's some sections I just want to point out. It established that I think are really make this a fantastic bill. It establishes a legal process where an agency caring for the animal can actually request the judge, actually require the defendant to post a bond to cover the cost of care. So it expands that list to not just prosecutors. If the defendant fails to pay, the animals are forfeited and can be placed for adoption, which reduces long-term shelter costs and speeds up placement into new homes. It also includes due process protections. Owners receive notice of a hearing on reasonable care costs and seizure legality. They can challenge both, and the agency seeking a bond must prove the legality of the seizure and the reasonableness of the costs. So states that have enacted bond and forfeiture laws, and I have a map in your packet that just has a visual of what other states are doing in this realm of cost of animal care. And as you can see, there's only 5 states that have no cost of animal care law in our country, and Vermont is listed as one with a less effective cost of animal care law because we only have the civil forfeiture proceeding. When I first started here 30-something years ago, there was a provision to, I think it was $1 a day per animal for 30 days, and they had to post a bond. And those cases were getting waived because the people were indigent. It was not a very well written law, and it wasn't implemented or used correctly. So we switched to the civil forfeiture. But as Trevor said, this is just another tool in a tool belt for humane agents to be able to deal with these cases, which are very they're costly, they're emotional, they're complicated, and it really does take an all hands on deck approach. One amendment that I did notice and I'll let Ann speak more to the cost of animal care map if you have questions about that, is that the hearing, the language on page 17, lines 7 through 9 says the hearing shall be conducted as promptly as possible after the court's receipt of the return of service process. We recognize that there are challenges to mandating hearing timelines to the judiciary, but this language is simply too vague and could allow abused animals to languish in a shelter environment, frustrating the very purpose of the law. So I offered some alternative language here. I don't have to read it to you. I've got it in my written testimony, where we actually recommend a certain period of time. And this sentence, time limits under the section shall not be construed as jurisdictional. That sentence is actually in the civil forfeiture law, which also requires a hearing within 21 days. So the expediency, the urgency of these issues really requires an expedient response. So we just recommend moving that line into the cost of animal care section, which would give the judiciary a little bit more flexibility in terms of when these cases are heard and what they're doing on the back end. And the other suggestion for an amendment was just that under the forfeiture section, that's on page 8, lines 19 through 29, and again on page 9, that we add cohabitate with to the list of prohibited, future rights, because these owners will oftentimes just give the animals to their sister or their brother or their roommate, and it's just another loophole that we want to make sure that we address. We're also extremely supportive of making the crime of animal sexual abuse a felony, especially with regard to with a minor. I've attached some studies which will maybe haunt you if you read them all, but they're good information about the state of animal sexual abuse in our world right now. But according to the American Academy of Psychiatry and Law, the number of bestiality-related arrests has risen by nearly 800% since 2000, which I thought was a extremely sobering statistic. I did work on the animal sexual abuse bill. Senator Dick Sears was the sponsor of that bill and the champion. I have to admit, I had a really hard time finding a sponsor for that bill. I don't think anybody wanted the stigma of sponsoring the bill, and Dick didn't care. He just wanted to help animals. So in 2017, we passed the existing law that you see in the testimony. I would also be supportive of moving any crime that happens in front of a child as a felony, which would mirror federal law when it comes to animal fighting cases. So animal fighting cases that are done in the presence of a minor are also a felony at the federal level. Yeah.
Just, you use percent, just how many cases was that?
I have the studies attached in my testimony. So if you want to, I'd have to take a look at where I pulled that from, but all of the references, the citations are here in my.
That was nationwide, right?
Yes.
And the other thing, just backing up a little bit, that I questioned before, the 5-year thing,
Yeah.
and you touched on a little bit of switching things to families and stuff like that, but what do you think about the 5 years?
I mean, we would definitely be supportive of increasing that time limit. What is really problematic is there are cases where abusers are either they're not fit to stand trial. I think of the Eve case specifically, where Carol Merchant was, she was determined not fit to stand trial. So she was never convicted, which means there was never, a mandatory psychological evaluation or those things that, needed to happen. I think she did actually get evaluation, but it wasn't mandated by the court. But we would definitely be supportive of increasing those timelines.
So the other thing that keeps coming back to me on past cases with this stuff is when the animals are seized, usually, like testimony has already been said, that they may or may not be able to get the animals back. A lot of times they just go and say they can't afford them. Or what is really used a lot, and since I believe they get away with it a lot, it appears they're malnutrition. They're not, but they are. How does that happen? And then on the other side, going back to the thing, when they say they can't afford them, but yet, like the Northfield case that I referenced before, and then they went to Williamstown and all that stuff. I think they went somewhere else after Williamstown.
I worked on that case, so it was very challenging. Yeah.
How does that happen?
I wish I knew. So if you can just clarify your question for me. So are you, I guess I'm just not really understanding the question.
So we both know about the Northfield case.
Right.
Right. That came before us,
Mhm.
right? And they said that they were out in the cold, they were no shelter, no anything, and then they put blankets over them, if I'm not mistaken. Then I think 1 or 2 of the horses, I forget, 8, 9, 11, something like that.
Yeah.
They said malnutrition. Now I drove up by there, and they certainly looked it to me.
Mhm.
And then I think some people came along and said, "Oh no, that was the way the horse is supposed to look," and all this,
Yeah.
which is all ribs and all this stuff. And it's like,
Right.
come on.
I know that case, I don't know that I would use that as an example, because I think that was the same case where the prosecutor in that case, the assistant state's attorney, was relieved of duty, and there were several other cases that he was involved with. She was allowed to sell some of those horses, which I have never seen in an animal cruelty case, and keep the proceeds. I think she was required to, the Vermont Humane Federation actually took possession of several, we removed the horses from the property. And I think she may have even gotten, some of those horses back, like you mentioned. So I can't speak to how sometimes cases just go, we have processes in place to hope to guardrails to hopefully that doesn't happen. But when the case is thrown out, and as Renee testified as well, sometimes animals go back to their abusers, which is, obviously not the outcome that we want.
It was actually unfair for me to bring that up to you. I apologize for that, because we not only have that on animals, we have that on a lot of other things too.
And the statistic I pulled was from this, the animal sex abuse information and resources page that I provided. So that's where you
Okay.
can find a citation for that.
In that case there, she got reimbursement or something back for selling
She was allowed to sell the horses and keep the proceeds.
and did she pay for the upkeep while the,
That's a good question. I don't recall. I recall that the Vermont Humane Federation member agencies, several of them took horses, and they covered those costs, and the Vermont Humane Federation repaid them with money that we had raised through fundraising to try to raise money for the case. But I don't recall what the reimbursement was, if any, from the state.
so it's mostly like the rescue shelters and all that stuff, with all animals and stuff like that. Usually it's
Right. I think we used Spring Hill Horse Rescue. There were some horse rescues. Dorset Equine, I don't think was even in existence back then. I mean, they may have been, but they weren't a big presence. So it was Spring Hill Horse Rescue that was involved in that case. Lucy McKenzie Humane Society had horses there. We lost one of her horses. I was there with the horse when she died. So
starvation. Okay, thank you.
my assumption, he did not have any necropsy done.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Over.
okay. Oh no, I'm on hot seat now.
No. How fast is it generally easier, you think, if the animals are given up early on? It's beneficial.
Mhm.
I mean, does it take a long time to rehome the animals,
Mhm.
or I'm just trying to?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the situation, and voluntary relinquishment is an option. It's spelled out in the statute, as well as strongly encouraged. Humane World has a law enforcement manual that we provide to when we go to the police academy. So everybody who graduates, every cadet, full-time, part-time, post basic, get a copy of that manual, and there are sample forms in there. One of them is a voluntary relinquishment form. What we don't recommend is that you make a trade and say, hey, if you relinquish the animals, we'll drop charges.
Well, that was going to be my other question
Right.
is, the voluntary relinquishment, is there a formal way of doing it so that they're not saying it's not an admission of guilt, but it doesn't absolve you from any prosecution?
Right. I mean, I think just there's nothing in the statute that says that it's, that we can't charge them if they relinquish the animals. And
Representative Dolan?
Yes, and I apologize. I stepped out of the room, so maybe this was covered. I heard you share that it can be hard to find placements for animals that are taken into custody. What happens in those cases? I'm assuming somebody does,
Yeah.
or
I mean, it's my understanding, and I give kudos to Renee and Heather and the Vermonters Against Cruelty to Animals. Many times they're looking for private citizens and animal control officers and boarding facilities. So I have concerns about chain of evidence, when animals are seized, and I have concerns with those animals are mandated by the court to go back, is putting somebody in that situation of having to return those animals. So there are serious concerns about that. In the past, the Vermont Humane Federation and the member agencies and bricks and mortar shelters across the state have stepped up, and they still do occasionally, but certainly not to the extent that we used to, because they would get animals, they'd be in legal limbo for forever. There's no idea when the case is going to be adjudicated, and no promise of any kind of reimbursement. In the meantime, those animals are taking space in the shelter, away from animals who need to be adopted and who are in the community who need help. So it's a really impossible situation. I think if we were to pass a cost of animal care law, it would be more encouraging for shelters to help in these cases if they knew that there was a shorter timeline, that they would not have to hold them indefinitely. And it's always their first question: were the animals seized? Were they voluntarily surrendered? What's the situation? Because that's going to inform how they're able to help, unfortunately.
I'm curious with that. I appreciate that's helpful to know. But is there anything that, when an animal is seized, like anything that should have been guardrails of the type of organization that gets control of the animal? Or should we say it's not just general citizen? I mean, I'm assuming it can work out great, but in those cases, there could be somebody who could get it and maybe isn't treating the animal any better and then getting paid now for it.
Right, exactly. So I can speak to Humane World for Animals. When we are involved in a case, we have a very clear memorandum of understanding with the law enforcement agency that we're working with. So in the Bakersfield case, again, in Franklin County, we did a horse case in St. Albans a couple of years ago. And it outlines that we will be responsible, we'll take care of the animals, we'll cover the cost of their care. We also do fundraise to be able to cover when it never, covers the cost, but it helps. So I think there needs to be very clear understanding, not just here, take this dog or 3 dogs and good luck. I mean, what if that person is hurt? Who's liable? Is the police agency liable for that dog bite? Is the owner liable? I don't know. So there are a lot of liability concerns. And speaking of liability concerns, I do want to say that there are liability protections for animal shelters and for veterinarians who get involved in these cases. Those provisions were added. The veterinary provision liability was, I think, in 2000, and the shelter one was more recent. But there is some liability protection if they assist law enforcement in a case. I think in the Northfield case and others, shelters have been threatened to be sued. People will show up, because it's in the news that the horses are at the Dorset Equine Rescue, or at the Maine SPCA, or wherever they end up going. And people will actually go. They'll visit their local animal shelter and demand to know where the animals are. So there are a lot of concerns. I would love to see. I know that Lisa Milat with the Division of Animal Welfare is going to be releasing her report with a lot more ideas on how we can handle some of these complicated issues. But this is really a critical, important. The cost of animal care, I think, is one of the biggest white elephants in the room for law enforcement and their ability to actually, work on these cases.
Yeah. And I guess I'm just thinking, is there pieces, and maybe there isn't, and I just haven't followed, of the types of organizations that can collect the payment.
Yeah.
And making it clear, like you have to meet circumstances, because if you're getting the benefit of getting payment for the care, we want to make sure you are providing a minimal level of care.
Right.
And I don't think that is spelled out fully in this.
Yeah. We certainly would have no objections to spelling that out. I don't think I know it sounds like a reasonable request to me. And in the very few cases where we have gotten reimbursement, we've kept, we've just kept receipts from, in the Franklin County horse case I mentioned, Dorset Equine had folks on the ground. They took the horses. It was also a herd of sheep that they ended up taking, and they provided those receipts. And then we worked with the prosecutor to figure out what the cost of care reimbursement would be. And then I also want to mention that the available animal cruelty prevention programs do not exist here in Vermont that I'm aware of. There are some online options. The case that Renee mentioned, I had researched and found a couple of online trainings you can take, and I don't know anything more about them, but that is, that can be a little challenging when that's ordered by the court and there's nowhere to send people. Let's see. I don't know that there's anything else more that I need to say about, you've got my written testimony on animal sexual abuse. There was the question about artificial insemination. I think, Eric was right on the exception and the thing that says, without a bona fide veterinary animal husbandry purpose. That was added when we created that, to address that. And there's also a provision in the statute that says that if you are working on a livestock, so any case involving livestock, and that includes horses, they have to consult with the Agency of Agriculture before any enforcement action is taken. So they'd have to show them, listen, this happened, and if the department determines that it was they were artificially inseminating their cow, then that would, that was an example, could be, exemption to that. But there are some provisions in the statute that exempt those acceptable animal husbandry practices that, that already exist out there. And I went to University of New Hampshire in an animal science program, so I know what it's like to have my arm like up to here in a cow. So that's not what we're talking about here.
Okay. Thank you. Just the other thing I really want to bring up, whether you're rescuing a pet or the pet is rescuing you. It seems like to me in Vermont, when you go through that process, which I've been through, it seems like it takes, if you want to go through the rescue societies, not picking on them, it's just a question for other people that are going through this. It's like you can't get your match, what's going on, or what the family wants and what the animal you want, say a dog. But yet we're having, as I understand it, there's van loads of dogs coming from other states. Do you know how that works and why that works like that?
I do. I mean, that's a whole other issue. It was actually a provision in 626, which created Lisa Milet's position, Division of Animal Welfare, concerning regulations for people importing animals into Vermont, as well as regulations for existing animal shelters and rescues. There is no enforcement agency that is doing annual inspections or biannual inspections or any inspections of our state's animal shelters and rescue organizations, which is a very big concern for us and for the Vermont Humane Federation. One of the things we'd like to work with Lisa on are, and they're complicated, but we can draw from other states and drafting regulations that would create things like quarantine protocols for animals coming in from other parts of the state. I mean, the problem is that a lot of this is happening underground. If somebody adopts an animal online, sight unseen, meets at the Walmart to get their dog, and good luck, and never to be seen again. So what's happening is the state's animal shelters, where those people are bringing those dogs to live in their community, if there's any kind of issue, physical issue or behavioral issue, then they're stuck with dealing. So they were going to bring them back to the shelter, not where they got them from these underground organizations that are bringing animals into Vermont. So you have sort of the, illicit trade of animals coming into Vermont. And then you have shelters who are working in partnership with shelters in other parts of the country, where they are formalized. They're bringing the animals into the shelter. They're quarantined. They're vetted. They're spayed and neutered. The shelter is there as a backup in case something happens with the animal. So there's a proper way to do it and an improper way to do it. But we need to be regulating how animals come into the state. A lot of the diseases that we're seeing, like heartworm, that was more prevalent in other parts of the country, might be coming to Vermont, for example. But also we need to start regulating our shelters and rescues as well. And
some of the other states have addressed what Representative Gosselin brought up.
yes, most of the New England states have very strict, Massachusetts has one of the most strict quarantine protocols for incoming animals. Vermont does not have any kind of protocols other than the animal has to have a rabies vaccination if it's old enough and a health certificate.
And this is something you folks are working on?
Yes, we'd like to see, I think that Representative Shea Waters Evans has a bill in House Government Ops that might address that. Maybe not this year, but it's something that is on the map to address as soon as we possibly can. The problem is the Agency of Agriculture used to enforce that statute and do the inspections. And they were removed as an enforcement authority at their request and an agricultural, one of their miscellaneous bills. So we weren't even aware it was happening until it was a done deal. So now
Up into the weeds.
Yeah.
More to be revealed on this.
Right.
Okay.
But it is a serious issue, and
Right.
you're definitely right
Absolutely.
to bring it up.
I'm just sure everybody that's still on the screen and probably in the room. I just know that we searched and searched and searched locally, New England, Pennsylvania, which Puppy Mill City apparently down there with one nationality or.
I know what you mean.
I'll walk gently on that. New York and all that stuff, and we were looking for a dog that was a lot like what we unexpectedly lost. And I tried and tried and tried, and we're a pretty good family, and the dog has provided a pretty good life and all that stuff. And to make a long story short, we ended up rescuing this dog, or this dog rescuing us. It's worked out very well. From Fort Lauderdale, Florida, we flew down to get her.
Yeah.
And bring her back, and went through the proper stuff. But I tried and tried and tried, and Representative Rachel was around me quite a bit on this, and she knew how emotional I was on it. And it took well over 30 days, maybe longer than that. And honestly, I was also fighting the demons that, do I really want to go through another? But the point of the matter is to go and get a dog that was out there, that's legit on, I forget the dog sites and the animals.
Pet Finder.
To go through that, to actually talk to the people that have the dogs and the rescue stuff and all this stuff, it's like, I mean, I might be exaggerating a little bit, but they almost like, then I'm sure there's a lot of bad actors out there, but it's like they almost treat you immediately like, well, we're not even going to bother with you, and you fill out paperwork, and all this stuff. You submitted all this stuff. You don't even get a phone call, but yet they want money, they want this, and all this stuff, and they have all these dogs, but you don't get them.
Right. And that's another reason why Vermont Shelters work in partnership with these rescue groups in other parts of the country, because we've done such a great job of spaying and neutering our animals. We don't always have puppies or plenty of kittens, but puppies are rare, small dogs are rare, a lot of big dogs here in the Northeast. So, but that's not always the dog people want. And we also encourage people to start with their Humane Society, because if they can't find the dog they want, to look to a responsible breeder who knows what they're doing and, is doing it responsibly.
There's less and less of those too.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So I think that concludes my testimony.
Okay.
These others have questions.
Then of Arsenal?
Last question. I want to make sure that I understood you correctly about on page 2, when you mentioned the are we talking about like artificial insemination, proper artificial insemination, or something else? So are you saying that we should add that clause without a bona fide veterinary or animal husbandry purpose to D on line 11? Or are you saying we've got it covered?
No, I'm just saying that the statute currently provides an exemption for a bona fide animal husbandry practices, which I believe that insemination would fall under.
Right.
Yeah, so I was just.
So D is, we're talking about something totally different, obviously, but.
Yes. Right. So it's the bona fide animal husbandry purpose that's the key language.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
there's.
So you're saying it exists already, or we should?
It exists already. So B is existing language, and C is new.
Right. So I'm just saying to D, where it was
to
left
D.
out. It was left out.
Oh, I see. Well, I don't know that there would be a bona fide animal husbandry purpose to transmit semen by person. But you're right. They would have a
animals.
for artificial insemination. I don't know. I would point to legislative council and see if that would address your concern. I'm not 100% certain.
Okay, thank you.
Said you're all set with your testimony, Joanne? And I'm assuming that you have more to add, since you guys were up together.
Yeah, we're together and of course again just to say I work for Humane World for Animals. I'm the director of our animal cruelty and fighting campaign. So our campaign works on improving dog fighting cruelty laws across the country. And I just want to reiterate the point that those laws become relatively useless if you can't afford to enforce them, if law enforcement can't afford to use them. So that's why these laws are so important. And I'll just in terms of like just looking at this big picture, and then I'll just be able for you can ask me questions because I think Joanne really hit everything on the head. It was expressed by other witnesses, and I just want to really emphasize this point that restitution is not a solution, right? Because we just find that defendants don't either pay their restitutions, don't pay enough of it, and it's just not a good solution. It can take so long that it's not a solution that would make the parties whole for caring for animals. The other point I would make, I think Joanne made this point, but I just want to emphasize it. In working across the country, in a majority of states that have good cost of care laws, a lot of times legislators or other stakeholders will see that groups are fundraising off cruelty cases. And shouldn't that fill the hole for the money that they're spending? It never does. I mean, we've had, years of experience. I also oversaw our rescue team, Humane World for Animals rescue team for years. And I can't think of a case where restitution was paid other than a portion that was, over time. So I want to make those 2 points about, again, why this bond and forfeiture cost of animal care legislation is so important to our organization and to agencies across the country that do this good work. And the other big picture things I want to make this. So 2 of the main concerns I've heard about this current civil forfeiture law in Vermont is that the process can take so long, and that it's basically the prosecutor making a case twice, right? Like first in the civil hearing and then later in the criminal case. I think our legislation that we're proposing, which is in addition to current law, as you all know, will help speed up the process, because not only would a prosecutor be able to bring file a petition for cost of care, but also the agency caring for the animal, right? So they have a much higher motivation to get this hearing going, right? Because they're like, wait, we're spending a lot of money. We need to get this going. And then during the process itself, it's a preponderance of the evidence standard. And so obviously that helps start the petition process with a caretaker being able to make the case without the level of a criminal case, right? Not beyond a reasonable doubt. And also with the original law, you have to prove each animal that was seized suffered from abuse. In the new law, cost of animal care law, you only have to prove that the warrant was valid and that the costs are reasonable. So it helps speed up the trial because there's less of a case to put forward, and you also you're not repeating what you would need to do in the criminal case. Anyway, so I think there are 2 good solutions to those 2 issues. We see this legislation is working across the country, right? We see it in action. It enables us to respond to cruelty cases in states that have this legislation, have this law. So anyway, so I hope that all makes sense. And if you have any questions, I would love to answer them.
Any questions? Representative Richardson?
Thanks. So I'm wondering, since you work with so many different states, if you're aware of evidence-based programs for people who are animal abusers.
Yeah, I heard this. It's very challenging because all regarding money, right? Like who's providing that? So you mean psychological therapy and
Right, because it
Yeah.
sounds like having a specialized evaluation is key to the treatment. And I know there are huge links between animal abuse and domestic violence. And so, again, I'm just wondering if you can point us to a state that has been taking it seriously about how to
how to rehabilitate or provide treatment to people who have been convicted?
So I hate to answer it this way, but no. I think, obviously we support that part of the law, part of the legislation that does look towards the rehabilitation and of sort of these issues that come up, psychological therapy, but I just haven't seen it. And I think we support it, but and I think one of the reasons it might not be narrowed down to cruelty issues is that already it's hard enough to find a training program just on anger issues or violence
Right.
issues that to really narrow it down to animals. I mean, Joanne could speak more to what Vermont has, but I haven't seen it. I'm sorry to say. It all has to do with money, right?
Right.
Animal hoarding is, I mean, the recidivism rate, animal hoarding is about 100%. So those aren't really good odds, unfortunately. And they need very specialized.
And it looks like cognitive behavioral therapy, it's sort of what's.
Yeah, I mean, there are some programs geared toward hoarding and hoarding
Right,
specifically
sure.
and animal
Right.
hoarding, but yeah, as Ann mentioned, there are few and far between.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Barbara.
I was gonna say, like, I get that, like, we need to solve the problem of where these animals are going and keeping them safe. And, I'm always trying to think about, like, how can we keep people from doing that in the first place? Can we break cycles of this happening? So thank you. It's hard work that you do, and I'm grateful. You both have years and years of dedication.
It's it's some cases are harder than others, that's for sure. But we have a great network here in Vermont of private and public sector and law enforcement, and I do believe that if we put our heads together, we can make it better. So I thank you for your attention to this bill, and hopefully.
Great, and thank you, and thank you to all our witnesses. I hope it gives you a little peace of mind to know, well, first off, there's going to be, a number of issues in this bill that we're going to be looking at, but I hope it gives you peace of mind that this committee is very good at vetting the bills that we do and taking a close look at things. So, and I think this is going to be a good bill for us to move along eventually. We're going to be getting done a little bit early. In my opinion, a little bit early is better than having to cut witnesses off and have them come back another day. So with that, we'll go offline and we'll see you tomorrow.